Think silhouettes will strange illuminated mannequins. Shall I stay here at the zoo? Should I go and change my point of view? Another argument. You know what you did to me. Now it's I will wait here for my man tonight. See you when you're making your plan. Tonight, it's a something so all right. See by so
como pudiese llevar. Last night I dreamt of something just like I'd never gone. I knew this song, young girl with eyes like the desert. It all seems like yesterday, not far away. Tropically island, all the nature wildlife is where I love to be. La isla bonita, and when the sun will play, the sun would set so high into my ears and in my eyes, the Spanish lullaby. Fell in love with San Pedro. Warm wind carried on the city, come to me. Te dijo, te amo. I prayed that the days would last, they went so fast. Tropical island breeze, all of nature wild and free. This is where I long to be, La Isla Bonita. And when the sun will play, the sun would set so high, ring through my ear and sing my eyes, the Spanish lullaby. Fiesta, you can watch them go by. Beautiful faces, no cares in this world. Little girl, little boy, and the boy. Loves a girl. Last night I dreamt of San Pedro. It all seems like yesterday, not far away. Tropical island breeze, all of nature wild and free. This is where I long to be, La Isla Bonita. And when the summer plays, the sun would set so high, through my ears and see my eyes, your Spanish lullaby. Holy island breeze, all of nature wild and free. This is where I long to be, La Isla Bonita. And when the summer plays, the sun would set so high, ring through my ears and see my eyes, your Spanish lullaby. La 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 la. Te amo. El viejo que te ama.
Good afternoon, everyone. Please take a seat. We are about to start. Well, I hope you had a good lunch and exciting conversations around biodiversity. My name is Camila Plata from Catalog of Life, and I'm also from Colombia. I'm from Bogota, so I'm very excited to receive you here. And in behalf of the organizing team, I welcome you to this session. We are going to talk about modern challenges of classic taxonomy and how to connect and keep catalogs up to date. Throughout the different sessions we have in these days, we have seen that having well-curated taxonomic frameworks is key for other modern things that are happening. So throughout this session, we will focus on how to address our current challenges as a foundation for having accurate information across the living sciences. We will have 14 talks divided in two sessions. After each session, we will have the discussion, so please keep your questions for the end. Okay, so being that, I welcome to Lauren Raz, based also here in Colombia, so she's a Colombian at heart, and she will let us know about World Flora Online.
Thanks, everyone. Can you see me? Okay. I think I'll try to, I'll stay here. Oh. Is it okay? Okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming to the session. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about World Flora Online and focus specifically on how we build the plant list part of World Flora Online. So I'm Lauren Raz, and my co-authors today are Mark Watson and Alan Elliott from Royal Botanic Gardens, Edinburgh, and Peter Wise-Jackson from Missouri Botanical Garden. And here they are. Alan's role in World Flora is 10 manager, so I'll explain a little bit about what that is. Mark and Peter are my co-chairs on the World Flora Online Council. So World Flora Online, it can be thought of really in two parts. First, it is an online resource portal with up-to-date scientific information on all known plants, implementing FAIR principles. But it's also a community. It's made up of member institutions and also participating plant taxonomists. So World Flora Online derives its mandate from the Global Strategy for Plant Conservation, which was first published in 2011. And this document was approved by the parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity. And within this strategy, there are numerous targets for plant conservation. It's advancing by itself. Está avanzando solo. So target 1 of the Global Strategy for Plant Conservation was to create an online flora of all known plants. And the product that came out of that was the World Flora Online. So in the Global Strategy for Plant Conservation, target 1 was the only target that was achieved. And so we're happy to continue building on that success and supporting conservation and sustainable development beyond 2020. In the most recent version of the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Kunming Global Biodiversity Framework, World Flora Online is the only online biodiversity initiative that's specifically mentioned. Sorry, it's advancing. So it's advancing by itself. So within the Global Biodiversity Framework, there are complementary actions that are laid out specifically for plant conservation. And one of them, Action 21D, specifically mentions the need to promote the continuous updating of World Flora Online. So we're taking that as a mandate and continuing forward with it. And within our organization, we have a strategic plan, which is charted up until 2030. So we have a long-term vision for this. So the portal has 3 core elements. It includes the WFO plant list, which is going to be the focus of this talk. We have species pages, which feature descriptive content, references, maps, and images that are attached to the plant list. And then we have voluminous about pages with general information about WFO. So the portal was launched in 2017. It was redesigned a few years later, 2021, with an expanded about pages and the addition of this feature, the WFO plant list. And at the current moment, we are developing a new portal. This is going to be a major priority for us within the coming year. So I hope by next year, maybe we'll have something to present about the new portal. But for now, I'll tell you that within the current portal, the content as of this date includes over 1,600,000 names, including 380,000 accepted names, almost 2 million distributions at global and national levels, over 630,000 descriptions, over 8 million references. This is going by itself, and over 56,000 images. So here's an example of what one of the species pages would look like, where we compile descriptive content, and most of that content is contributed by our member organizations, which are published floras generally. Sometimes they can be floras that were born digitally as well. So we attach this descriptive content to the backbone. So at this time, we're depending on our members in the consortium to contribute these sources. So that brings us to the community part of World Flora Online. And so who are we? We're an international consortium of 58 institutions and growing, and our members sign an MOU to be part of the initiative, and there's no cost to join. We're currently distributed all around the globe, although we're making continual efforts to do outreach to institutions, especially here in the Global South. A big change for us happened just about a month ago when WFO became registered as a legal entity under Swiss law. We had a meeting about a month ago in Geneva and registered the organization as an official association. This is the seal of the notary that we went to, and we thought it was a good omen that the name of the notary was Benedict de Candolle. So we hope that that augurs well for our organization. So really at the heart of who we are the taxonomic expert networks. These are what we call the TENs. And the TENs are groups of taxonomic specialists who are working towards a consensus classification for the World Flora Online. And ideally, our TENs should be open to inclusive, representative, and collaborative. Generally, the TENs work at family level, doing curation of names in the backbone at family level, although we do have a few of what we call high-level TENs who work on larger groups like the pteridophytes, the bryophytes, the conifers. We have a few TENs working at the order level, like Caryophyllales. We're in the middle of consolidating a Zingiberales TEN right now, and a few groups that work below the family level as well. Some of the TENs predate the World Flora Online, and many of them are in fact new and spurred on to work together because of this initiative. So at the present time, we have 61 taxonomic expert networks that are contributing to the curation of the taxonomic backbone. And there are over 900 taxonomists that are participating in these TENs. So at the family level, for all terrestrial plants, we have about 55% of families covered with taxonomic scrutiny by the TENs. And that adds up to about 50% of all species that have been actively curated. And some of the TENs in the last couple of years have been publishing their experiences in articles like these in specialist botanical journals to discuss how they're working together in technical as well as sociological aspects. So these are really nice documents for sharing with the community for other people who are interested in forming TENs. So I think there was this. So while people power of the taxonomists is really at the key to the success of the WFO initiative and has really taken off, especially in the last couple of years, we know that people can be at their best when they have the right tools to get their work done. So a real game changer for us has also been, as well as the growth of the TENs, giving them a tool to work with, which is an editing platform, a custom editing platform that was designed by and for WFO called Rakis, and it's administered by Alan, our TEN manager. This tool was developed, the lead developer is Roger Heim, who's based at the Royal Botanical Gardens, Edinburgh. So this tool is our main tool at the moment for managing the taxonomic backbone. Direct access is given to the TENs if they wish to edit directly within Rakis, but the platform can also ingest taxonomic data from other platforms such as Edit or TaxonWorks. And it's a browser-based tool, requires user authentication via ORCID ID, and users are assigned, given only access to the specific groups that they work in. So here we have all of the nomenclatural fields and ways to assign synonymy. We're expanding out the literature references right now within Rakis, which is also a great support service for the TENs to be able to have the literature compiled for them, and we're using Platzi to do this. So I'll tell you just briefly a little bit about the workflow to produce the plant list. So the data are compiled within Rakis, and so the taxonomic experts can either input data directly, do the editing directly in Rakis, or they can feed the data to the TEN manager, who will integrate the data from other sources into the editorial platform. Our 10 manager has other responsibilities in the administration of the backbone as well, like data cleaning, deduplication, and also bringing in data sources from non-10 sources. So I'll tell you a little bit about some of these other sources. So we do monthly updates from IPNI, the International Plant Names Index, where new names are brought in or records that have had any kind of correction to them. And if 10s are seeing some of the names get shunted over to the 10s first. And if 10s have any new names or corrections of their own, these get fed back to IPNI also. So we have good dual communication. We use as a default classification for groups that do not have 10s, the World Checklist of Vascular Plants, which is also produced by Q. So that's sort of our base layer. And there are sometimes names that are brought in from WCVP that are not necessarily in IPNI. So we do updating of the backbone from WCVP as well. And of course, the classification comes from WCVP at this time because IPNI is just the names without the classification. So once the backbone is, we have a twice yearly release of the backbone. The backbone is used to attach all of the content within WFO, but we do put out a June and a December release, 1 minute, okay, of the backbone. And that is made available through Zenodo with a DOI. It's also made available through Checklist Bank and directly through the WFO portal. And we do have an API as well. What we're looking towards is for the future is forming a general curation team. And my time is up. Should I keep going? Or it's okay. Wrap up. Okay. So sorry. So we're just experimenting right now with creating a general curation team, which includes the 10 manager and volunteers from the consortium to develop and test workflows to place unresolved names, which remains an issue for us, develop workflows to make changes to the existing classification. And we see great potential to collaborate with our colleagues at Q on literature scanning workflows to flag classification changes for this team, even for the 10s. And we'll be using GitHub to log issues and discussions. And we see here opportunities to engage students and interns in exercise of taxonomy. And finally, on the horizon, we also do have plans to integrate plant ID tools, which is also part of our remit from this new version of the Global Strategy for Plant Conservation, and to integrate occurrence data. We've distributed some pamphlets here, which have also an insert with a link to a survey about plant identification tools that you as a user community might like to see incorporated within WFO. So we ask that you, if you have a chance to fill out that survey, if you're interested. And I want to just make one last comment that, well, maybe I'll just leave it for questions. We always get questions about what about the other big plant databases? So I have one last point to sort of preempt that, but we can save it for the discussion. So.
Lauren? Thank you, Lauren. We'll have time for discussion, so keep up those questions. We continue with plants, so I invite Richard Dodd from Q to tell us about plant cultivar names.
Good. Buenas tardes. I'm Richard. I think our talk follows on nicely from that one, and it's great to see the importance of a solid backbone, and you'll see that it joins in nicely with what we're doing at Q. I'm part of the Q's integrated collections management team, or ICMS, which is our collections system for all our collections at Q. I should point out at this point, I'm an IT person, not a curator, botanist, or taxonomist, especially not a taxonomist. So I'm looking at this from a systems point of view and some of the challenges that brings us technically, but obviously the science plays in. That's the right way. Just to give you a very quick background about Q, we have about 12 different collections now, previously all in their own siloed databases. Over the last 4 or 5 years, we have pulled them together into a single system. the ICMS system. And in parallel to that, we've been running two significant projects. One was the ICMS system development itself, and the other is our digitization project, in which we've been aiming to digitize our roughly 8 million herbarium and fungarium items. Our target for completing that is March next year, and we're just about on target for that. The ICMS system itself was born partly out of wanting to see some linkages between our different collections, which we couldn't get when they were siloed, but also from a technical point of view, from a supportability and security point of view of the data. When we moved things into the central system, we obviously had some issues with bringing things together. Each previously had its own requirements, and we've had to try and accommodate all of those within the one system. We have here an economic botany collection, which is obviously very, very different to a herbarium voucher. And it needs an example here on the right-hand side. You can see it's got information linking it to more than one species, which is unusual for, and we obviously need provenance information on the left. Again, something which is different for this collection than previous collections that we've migrated. Equally with the seed collection, we were, with all the collections, taxonomy has been very important. In particular, with the seed collection, we need to know things such as its red list status when we're dealing with those seeds and looking after them. But it was with one of the later collections that we migrated, the living collection, that we encountered a need to improve what we were doing around taxonomy. Pulling together different collections and trying to combine things from a taxonomic point of view has its issues. These are just some of them. Most of these we've managed by a lot of matching script, trying to pull things together to work out whether things were actually the same thing in between two systems when we've pulled them together. We've also had to introduce fields into the system so that we can keep tabs on the historic information as well as moving to the latest taxonomic consensus. So yeah, if we look here, we have a herbarium voucher, and it's, let's zoom in slightly, as well as its basic taxonomic name information, scientific name. We have fields for verbatim name, vernacular name, non-Linnaean name. So we can keep that older information, but also be referring to it as its most up-to-date scientific name. Within our database, we hold these things. It's in a sort of modular fashion. But we present them all together when we pull them together for the end user in the application. When we've introduced the living collection, we've had to pull in extra modules for the vernacular name, hybrids, and finally cultivars. So for all of this to work, we need solid backbones, and we rely on the World Checklist of Vascular Plants and the Index Fungorum, which you've just heard about, WCVP. These provided the backbone for all the features that we had to this point. But with cultivars, we had a bit of a problem in that there wasn't one. So I'll come back to how we actually tried to deal with that in a minute, but just to take a little bit of a sidestep, what is a cultivar and why is it important to us? So whereas wild plants named, the nomenclature is governed by the International Code of Nomenclature for Algae, Fungi and Plants, the ICN. When it comes to cultivated plants, they're managed by the International Code of Nomenclature for Cultivated Plants. And using their definition, just expanding on that slightly, a cultivar is a set of cultivated plants which have all some special feature in common, e.g. a flower, colour, or shape. Critically, with some deliberate human intervention to get there. As long as those features are distinct, uniform and stable, that gives us a cultivar. Why are they so important to us though? If we think about the plants that we encounter in our daily lives, a lot of them are cultivars. The crops, plants that we use in an urban environment, many of them are cultivars. So they are maybe a category that's been slightly sidelined when we look at in research. We're concentrating primarily on wild species, but this is a section that we shouldn't really be forgetting. So getting back to our system, how have we managed to, what we tried to do to accommodate them? Well, we had a starting point. We had accumulated a list within Q, and that's been our starting point. So we have a list of cultivars which we could plug into our database and say this is our starting list of names. We have also, in terms of when we're trying to introduce new names into our system, we've done it in a way that tries to bring some control. So we've got a form on the top left is a form that we use when a new cultivar is being created. We use expression builders to format the name based on the scientific name, and thereby hopefully bring some consistency to the naming. Currently, the difficult job of managing cultivars is shared by a group of about 80 worldwide authorities, the International Cultivar Registration Authorities, ICRAs. Example is the Royal Horticultural Society in the UK. The scheme operates under the ICNCP code, and its chief aim is to avoid duplications in naming and to make sure the ICNCP guidelines, rules, naming conventions are followed. The ICRA system has been in operation for about 50 years and has contributed significantly to standardization and stability amongst hybrid cultivar nomenclature. However, it isn't as not all taxonomic groups are covered, and the groups that are managing the naming are dispersed, and there are a number of them, as I've mentioned. So for us in our system, for us to pull everything together into a single list for our system, we would need to contact all of them and get their information and collate it ourselves. So that leaves us with a question. Could we perhaps as a community do more? Could we try and collate things in the way we are doing with the WFO, WCVP and so on, that would be beneficial to us all in our ongoing research? So just to summarize, cultivars are important to us. We're doing what we can at Q to make sure we don't make the problem worse by by continuing to be consistent with how we name new things. And yeah, can we do any more is a question, maybe for later. Thanks very much for listening. A few thanks to other people who have helped with the presentation. Gracias.
Thank you, Richard. Next is Lynn van de Piete from FLIS. She's going to talk about taxonomic name linkage services. Welcome.
Oops. This works. Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm presenting on behalf of Roger Hyam, actually, of the Royal Botanic Garden in Edinburgh. Fortunately, he couldn't be here this week, so I'm taking over for him. Now, the work I'm presenting is made possible through the TETRIS. TETRIS is transforming European taxonomy through training, research, and innovations. And this is an ongoing European Horizon project, and it's led by the Consortium of European Taxonomic Facilities, or CETAF, and aims at providing knowledge systems and services to tackle biodiversity loss. Now, within TETRIS, third-party projects were launched, and one of these projects is TNLS, which is what I'm presenting here, Taxonomic Name Linking Services. So TNLS itself, the project, is a collaboration between the World Flora Online, the World Register of Marine Species, WORMS, and the Pan-European Species Directories Infrastructure, PESI. The project is developing a unified and a transparent approach to name matching big data, and it's creating lasting tools that can make biodiversity research more accurate, more connected, and more impactful. Now, big question, why do we need name matching? Until not so long ago, not really, because you were working very locally, one researcher, one data set who knew what he or she was doing, and it was quite easy. Now, going further through time, of course, am I working? Yes. You're looking at bigger scopes. You're looking at integrating data sets from several areas, and you come into what is called data merging. And if you're merging data, then of course, you need to be sure that you're dealing with, or you're sure that you're dealing with the same species names or taxon names. And the more data sets you are combining is also the more possible problems that you are encountering with your species names. Coming to the current era of big data, what we're also dealing with is 3 V's. There's the volume of the produced data, there's the diversity of the variety and the format, which you need to integrate together, and there's also the speed or the velocity at which data are being generated. So the more data, the bigger the name matching challenges are becoming. Just 2 examples to illustrate the importance of taxon matching when you're aggregating data sets. Both examples, so the left and the right, demonstrate that your taxon names are very prone to spelling errors, but also to other errors. And those need to be sorted out to make sure that you know what you're talking about. So the matching of, or the quality control of your taxon names is very important to avoid an overestimation, for example, of your biodiversity in a specific region, and also to avoid a misinterpretation on the occurrence of, for example, rare species in an area. Now, in smaller issues, a lot of these things can be resolved manually. But if you're looking at larger studies, bigger data, like monitoring networks or combining data sets from very different backgrounds and domains, these can become a major hurdle. Now, for those of you who often work with species names, I think you can kind of relate to my personal feeling on this one. What on earth was that taxonomist thinking when he was naming this species? You're not making it easy for yourself, let alone make it easy for someone else. So it's an issue. It can be an issue. On the other hand, there's also several ways to correctly spell a name. These are all accepted or commonly used varieties or spellings of that same name. And then, of course, there's also computer things. Everybody, I think, knows Excel, the autofill function that gives you species being described in the year 2020, or no, 2200, whatever. So what we're trying to do is we need to disambiguate all these species names or these species errors. All these name matching challenges can kind of be summed up as the 4 horsemen of non-accepted names, because they're often leading to chaos and especially despair with the scientists that are dealing with the taxon names and are trying to disambiguate them. Now, the first horseman there is the unaccepted names is the most common ones, like homonyms and synonyms. The same name for 2 different things or different names for the same thing. But next to that, there's also alternative representations, species names without or with the subgenus sometimes in there, all of that together. And the temporary names and the uncertain names are also being added in the mix. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't stop there, because in modern times, what we're also dealing with is the purely database generated incorrect names. Some of those are relatively easy to spot. There you go. And we've learned that a lot of those come from the OCR. So in the past, when you were PDFing or your literature and then transferring them to a data set, there were very subtle changes in the spelling of names. And those ones are actually relatively easy to spot. But again, it doesn't stop there, because what we're also dealing with is an extra level of complexity by generating what is being referred to right now by taxonomists as zombie names. And a vast amount of online content, as we know now, is being generated using the large language modeling tools, the LLMs, and they are creating incorrect inputs. And that is a potential to produce a zombie or an apocalypse of names that could overwhelm our resources. And with our resources, I'm also referring to our taxonomists that need to deal with this. They need to figure out these names. Just one example that we are aware of within the plants is on the left, so the name on the left side is the auto-generated incorrect name, basically because a translation system created a Latinized name from a Chinese vernacular name. So this name is in circulation because it has been picked up by someone in literature, which means that we have to deal with it. Now, when using existing name matching tools, we already know that 10 to 20% of those names do not match perfectly, and they require human intervention. And with datasets containing thousands of names, that becomes a significant obstacle in the analysis process. So why exactly do we want a common name matching specification if taxon matching tools already exist? Well, what we want to do is just make things easier for everyone. So it's clear that both for the researchers and the technicians that are often helping the researchers, which IDs and which names they need to use. Because in the end, that's what it's about. It's matching a unique identifier to each taxon entry in a data set. The project is developing a common name matching design pattern that is applicable across taxonomic registers. And that includes, for example, PESI, Catalog of Life, World Flora Online, the GBIF Checklist Bank, and also the Global Names Architecture. And it started, the whole project, what we've done started with a description of which services are currently available and are being provided. And we're now merging this into a common vocabulary so this can be used across different services. The intention of this project is to make it easier for the researcher to use any of the existing name matching services that we have and to use them interchangeably. Right now, the project is coming towards an end. It's not finished yet. And the recommendations are being developed as to which name ID, for example, is the best one to store locally after you have done your matching, and under which circumstances an ID recommendation can be used. And we're also investigating how to extend this pattern into a formal API application. So it's just not just through an interface as a human, but also machine to machine. As I said, the project is running towards its end, which means that, as in most projects, everything happens in the last couple of weeks of the project. This is exactly what's happening right now. So I cannot show you real results and links to go and try this, go and do this. What I can give you is one example of an implementation on top of the World Flora Online. And I can also let you know already that all reports and all documentation will be available as soon as they're fully written. So keep an eye on the Tetris website and on any social media, and I'm pretty sure you will see everything. I'd say if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask them, but I'm afraid that most of the questions I'm going to have to redirect to Roger himself because he's the brains behind the project and the collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. And now from the Botanic Garden and Botanical Museum of Berlin, Walter Berenson is going to tell us about recommendations for checking scientific organism names. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm also here representing the Tetris project you already heard about, and so I don't have to go into details. Let me see, how does this work? just like that. I'm going to represent a little a different perspective, let's say. What we heard from Lane really is the aggregator and joining data sets perspective of name matching. And I want to look at this from the user perspective. So we have lots of small and bigger and very big data sets out there that want to do some name matching, either just to improve quality of their names or perhaps also to link up to some aggregator, like in our case for plants, WorldFlora Online with their IDs, to actually see that things link up with these global and coordinated resources. Data integration across the web is still very much based on scientific names. Of course, the molecular things come up, and we have heard a lot of things in this conference, but still that's the main integrating string that actually binds results from ecology and from any kind of research together. And so that people use the same names is very important. And I think it's a first step to use the same name IDs in the end to link all these things together semantically. And name matching services are a core enabling technology for that. So what to tell users that come to you what to use, because that's what users do, because it's a very confusing landscape for them. There are, whoops. Oops, that was the wrong direction, sorry. Here we are. I think we first have to look at what are the elements. So we have taxonomic data sets that are lists of mostly hierarchically organized taxonomic data for specific groups, or in one case, I'd say for Catalogue of Life, for all organisms. And what we see with these is describing these data sets is largely lacking. So it's very difficult to find out what's the right data set for you if you're not somebody within this community. And things like scope and completeness and geography and all that. Geography and taxonomy are the only things that are often mentioned, but often in text descriptions. The name matching services, there's the same problem. Actually, what do you want and which service to use? Some match your canonical names, which is a name without authors, etc. Some match your full name, like with authors and abbreviated or not. And what you have to use actually depends on what you want. And so there's no one workflow for all users. It's actually, we have to find a way how to direct users to the right combination of services and data sets. Well, and users are diverse because I've, over the past 2.5 years with the Tetris project, looked at a variety of people who I thought must be interesting in name matching, and some of them really were. And they are confused. It's really true, and it's clear because it's a completely different thing if you have an obligation from your funding agency. You have to put some ID on your name in your ecological data set. Or if you're dealing with something like the Euromed plant base, a checklist of European plants, where you want to put a WorldFlora Online ID on it. So it's very varied. So we should actually look at what are these user requirements and can we categorize them in some way? And then we have to find the metadata that actually hit these requirements and provide access to these metadata, of course. So with that, we could actually build tools to help users. Key user requirements, I just list them there. It's not the, well, it is a kind of priority list, but it's a bit mixed. Organism group I already mentioned. Of course, if you're interested in plants, I give you a different data set than if you're interested in insects. But also often it's important to know if certain specialized groups like marine or fossils are in question, because we have existing resources that are specialized on those, and people should be directed to these resources. Geographic scope is another one. We have few country checklists that are available for name checking at the moment, but this will hopefully increase with developments like Checklist Bank. And so it's very important to have a kind of well-defined geographical scope description. Number of names, that's just a technical issue because some services will not allow in direct interfaces and more than, let's say, 3,000, 5,000 names. Then why I'm doing from the user side the name matching, and some people just want to check that they got the name string right. That is completely okay. Some want to get actually the entire name string right, with authors or with year in the case of zoology. And of course, that might be also okay if you just want to do an orthographical check, but you want to go further and find out, is this on the aggregator side something that accepted? For example, in the consensus list for plants in World Flora Online, it would be the accepted taxon name. And you might also want to know in what family or higher group this data by name is actually being grouped by that aggregator. The next step goes more into this real linking perspective. Most people who are doing these orthography checks will, in the first place, not be really interested in some IDs or something like that. Although that's what we wish for, because if they actually go for a name ID on the provider's side, they can later link up again and see what happened to my name in the end in that aggregator, if there are any changes. But some want that, some want it very extensively, some only want the link to the accepted name, so different requirements there as well. And then we have people with no technical expertise on their side who just want to use the thing without really knowing about internet technologies, and others really want to download the data set and do the matching themselves, or actually download the entire service on their own server to experiment with it. Well, we did a little demonstrator application that's called Check My Name to actually try to capture that. And probably you can't see the interface, but I hope you can see the URL. It's a prototype that David developed, and it's actually based on 3 tables of metadata, and it's by far not complete, and it's by far not all the metadata we want or the right metadata we want, but it shows it works on this, and it gives actually the user a possibility to search for the data set that fits their requirements. And I think what we need to do is actually work on this metadata, try to find what else is needed, what could be better, for example, adapted to Darwin core terms and things like that to make things more transparent. And I think that's a job that is actually can be done quite easily. The other part is that the aggregators or services actually need to implement that. And I'm calling for the data set aggregators like species list, checklist bank, or global names to actually do something about their metadata to make possible to actually gather them from their sites. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. And now we jump into some fresh waters. Geraldine Mertens has an online presentation about infrafada.
Hi everyone, my name is Geraldine and I'm the manager of the Infrafada project that is funded by the Belgium Science Policy Office. It's a joint collaboration between the Royal Belgium Institute of Natural Science in Belgium and the University of Natural Resources and Life Science, Boku in Austria. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present the InfraFada project today. Although unfrozen freshwater cover less than 1% of the Earth's surface, 10% of all animals occurs only in freshwaters. So this discrepancy where biodiversity in freshwater is 1 or 2 order of magnitude higher than what can be expected from the surface coverage on the planet is known as the paradox of freshwater. These systems are among the most threatened ecosystem worldwide because of human impact and resulting climate change, with their biodiversity declining drastically. So there is a need to provide a quantitative estimate of freshwater animal biodiversity to help define conservation strategies and priorities. So we need to go back in time a little bit, where the initial FADA project emerged more than 20 years ago in the context of International Decade Water for Life. At that time, about 60 leading taxonomic were involved in assembling a team of close to 150 experts who gathered global information on specific and generic diversity for each animal group, as well as their zoogeographical distribution and endemicity. The results of this initiative identified more than 125,000 species and more than 11,000 genera. These results were published in 59 chapters of a special issue of the international journal Hydrobiologia. And the first complete and global assessment highlighted the gaps in basic knowledge of freshwater animal biodiversity richness at zoogeographical and global scale. However, taxonomic is a living discipline where new taxa are being described and existing taxa are being placed in new taxonomic position. Therefore, after 1.5 decade of relative inactivity, FADA needed to be upgraded both technically and with regard to content. Since 2023, Belespo funded the new project InfraFada, which will run until the end of 2026. The goal of InfraFada was to revive and modernize the previous efforts. So with this project, FADA is becoming more ambitious and also go beyond building an updated database of freshwater animal taxa. It also aims to link the taxa list as the taxonomic backbone to international research infrastructure, such as the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, the Catalogue of Life, and the Freshwater Information Platform. The first objective of the project was to rebuild the FADA consortium of taxonomic experts. Several experts involved in the first FADA edition were willing to continue the work for InfraFada. However, as you can imagine, several others had meanwhile retired or had other commitments, and this one needed to be replaced. All the experts that are now involved in the new project have been asked to update the taxa list for their animal group, which will then be fed into the FADA database. They are all actively working, and we already received 18 lists that have been updated. The second objective was to develop an online taxa information management system that we called FADA Team, which will allow the expert to curate, maintain, and publish their taxa list. This list will be made available to all potential users and also interoperable with other data infrastructure. So, of course, a crucial aspect was the sustainability. We wanted to build a system that the expert would be able to update continuously so that the database will remain alive in the long term. And once the data will be fully operational, the database, the FADA expert will be able to enter a new taxa or insert new taxonomic decision for their animal group without further technical intervention from our part. So while others will also be able to browse, search, and export the data in open access. Third objective is built on the two previous one and will be to link the FADA taxa list as the taxonomic backbone to international research infrastructure, such as GBIF, COAL, and the FIP. A crucial collaboration with Worms and Taxonworks was really necessary here, since a lot of experts had moved their data to this infrastructure meanwhile, and we wanted to avoid the duplication of effort. So an agreement was made to enhance the data exchange between FADA and Worms database, enabling better development and sharing of critical freshwater biodiversity information. Here is a general overview of our workflow. So basically, the experts provide us with their updated taxa list, or if they had moved their data to Worms or Taxonworks, then as I told you, we are collaborating closely with them to export and transfer the data to avoid the duplication of effort. Once the data are imported into the FADA database, then these lists become accessible through our platform and also feed into Catalog of Life and GBIF. So this way, researcher, policymakers, or anyone interested can search, browse, and download reliable freshwater species list in our database. The objective 4 and 5 dealt with the publication of the data and also the outreach activity. So we aim to publish a reference taxa list, including analysis with associated data paper in scientific journals and in freshwater metadata journals, respectively. And it is also planned to publish an update of the highly cited FADA Hydrobiologia 2008 volume. And as you can imagine, outreach activities such as attending conference is also a priority, targeting various potential stakeholders community to enhance the valorization of input by our experts. So to conclude, we believe that it is essential to maintain a dedicated database for freshwater species to establish freshwater as the third biotic realm alongside terrestrial and marine system. So FADA will provide the digital and living heritage of freshwater data, and we hope it will be helpful to build a bridge between science and policy and help maintain and restore freshwater resources. So I would like to thank you all for your attention today. I couldn't be there with you, but if you have any question, you have my email on the slides, and I would be very happy to answer any of your question. So please reach out to me if you have any, and I wish you all a very pleasant conference and interesting conference. Have a good day.
Thank you, Geraldine. She will be online for the discussion part of this session. So now I welcome Sarah, who is going to tell us about TyCall and how they build their classification.
Thanks, Camila. And hello, everyone. I'm Sarah from Taiwan. It's not my presentation. Okay. Oh, I'm Sarah from Taiwan. This is the old version of my file. Did you get new one? No? Okay. Okay, I will explain by myself. I'm from Taiwan Biodiversity Information Facility, and my name is Si Cai, and you can call me just Sarah. And the second author, Jingying, our developer, is also here. I think it's okay. Okay. So today I'm going to show how we use structured name usage data to build flexible taxonomy viewpoint checklist. Yeah. Actually, I want to introduce a little bit about TICO. TICO is a national database that maintains national species checklist in Taiwan, and its catalog of life in Taiwan we abbreviate TICO. And we had it renewed in 2023, and we have a whole new phase and new data structure. And the core idea of the new data structure is the taxonomy name usage and TNU. And TNU means how a scientific name is cited in the reference. So like here is you can imagine is a reference, and the taxonomy treatment the part, and so the scientific name cited as a accepted name is a TNU, and its synonym is another TNU, something like that. And so TNU provides taxonomy viewpoints, and the properties is based on the author's viewpoint, and it also connects to entity that like specimen and distribution. Yeah, so it shows the scope of each TNU. So we developed an online platform called Scientific Name Management Tool. It's very simply the words. So it can the tool, this tool, the platform can store TNUs and can let users to manage scientific names and reference, and support taxonomies in organizing the taxonomy treatment by editing the name usage. So the name tool actually can compile many checklists from many different references. And for TICO, we follow the latest reference to generate a checklist, the national checklist, follow one taxonomy view. And this year, we had a new function called build classification. Users can choose the reference they want to include and generate different taxonomy views checklist. So we have 3 ways to filter TNUs. So to generate checklist. So they can filter by higher taxon, by reference, and by region. Each method follows a slightly different workflow to decide which taxa or which references they are going to include, then generate the checklist. So the first, by higher taxon, users can input, for example, a plant genus. Then they have option to choose, like we can decide only in Taiwan or not, or whether to exclude cultural species. And the system will bring in the reference, the related references, and the users can choose which reference they want to include, then generate checklist. And the second, by reference, users can choose reference directly and include all the taxa listed in them. And the same option, then generate checklist. By region, we provide a list of townships and counties in Taiwan for users to choose, and they can select a biological group. Then they can generate a regional, like counties, a plant list, something like that, then generate checklist. So we have do some processing that didn't show up, but I added in the new version. The process will check the TNUs that filtered and check the synonyms, homotypic names, and misapplied names, and they will decide the latest TNU to give the validity. So the validity of the checklist is based on the reference priority, and users can just have a check, and then can set a title before import into an editing area. So my checklist is an editing area in our platform. So users can review, refine, and add information, and also customize their own perspective by editing the TNUs. And download and export for publishing. So it becomes a circular workflow that will facilitate publication and sharing. So after publishing, the private checklist in my checklist editing area can be imported to public area in our platform that will feed back into Taiko. So the circular is like this. And that will make the taxonomy knowledge more integrated and sustainable. So conclusion, so this kind of implementation takes TNU-based data management can help taxonomy knowledge be more preserved and reusable, and can provide a flexible tool for researchers. I have an outlook because we maybe have a project. We want to use this new function to help the flora in Taiwan. Actually, almost too close. So the flora of Taiwan, the second version, I don't know if you know that it was published more than 20 years ago, and the community in Taiwan is looking forward to have a new one to follow. And so we hope the new function can help these works. Thank you.
Sarah. So now again, I invite Lynn to come. She is going to show us how Worms is handling non-linear names.
Good, thank you. Me again. Now, as within my actual function as coordinator of the World Register of Marine Species. So a pleasure to take you in the next 10 minutes or so through temporary names and how we are going to deal with them within the World Register of Marine Species. A very long time ago, a very wise man said some very wise words. We cannot work without naming things. We need names to be able to talk about biodiversity, to be able to fix everything within what we know and how we deal with things. Linnaeus said it first. His words have been reiterated in several versions later on, but all saying the same thing. We need taxonomy. They are the basics for our biodiversity or marine biodiversity or all biodiversity research that we do. Get one back. So for a long time, since Linnaeus, binomial naming system has been the golden standard within taxonomy. But what we've seen very recently is, without a doubt, linked to technological evolution, but also the pressure that our ocean is under, is that there's been a real explosion of other names, non-Linnaean names. And they're all part of the overall need to be able to estimate how many marine species are out there. How many marine species live in our ocean. Species are currently, missing one there. Species are currently being recognized and named outside of the conventions of the classical Linnaean taxonomical system. And these names are often referred to as temporary names. They have a variation of naming, but in essence, they are all temporary names. Temporary names being informal names given to taxa, so that we can temporarily work with them and use them within our research. By definition, a temporary name is exactly that. It's supposed to be temporary. It's there waiting for a complete identification in a number of cases, or it is there to wait for its final formal naming in the Linnaean system. Now, what have we done within worms, within the community of worms? We have identified two types of temporary names. And type, am I going to, no, there. Type 1 temporary names is actually referring to those incompletely identified taxa. They mostly have one of those open nomenclatures, SPER 1, SPER A, SPER 1, 2, 3, whatever. And these names are useful within the given context of a specific research. So within your samples, SPA1, SPA2, they make sense. They're recognizable for you, but they're not fully determined, and they just get a label for ease of communication. Now, temporary type 2 names, on the other hand, we know or we define as temporary names or species that have actually been confirmed as being new to science, but they haven't yet gone through that full formal description and then publication of that formal name. They can, for example, come from taxonomic studies that delineate the taxa that are known to be new. They just haven't made it to that full description yet. Now, temporary names and taxonomic databases, that's what we're looking at. And what are the challenges here? The current challenge is to be able to manage these type 2 temporary names in a robust and a standardized manner. So we can actually make them part of the major data flows, so they can contribute to global species registers, as well as being able to include them in existing quality control procedures and taxonomic naming studies. These type 2 temporary names can then later on still be linked to their formal Linnaean names once they're officially described. And this is actually the most important part of a temporary name. It's a stable solution, but it's an interim solution. It means that that temporary name is not the end of the line. It's not the end of the work. The work by the taxonomist still needs to be done. Now, how do we deal then with those temporary names? What is the way forward for worms? Worms itself is an authoritative classification and catalog of marine names, and it's managed by a wide variety of experts, mainly taxonomists, also ecologists involved. Worms aims to capture all the published names regardless of their status. So it doesn't matter whether it's an accepted or an unaccepted name. We connect them in the system. We connect the relationships. And this way, Worms provides a comprehensive list of all the names of marine organisms, and it can serve as a guide as well to go to the interpretation of taxonomic literature. Now, within Worms, we have decided to include these type 2 temporary names. Remember, the ones that we know that they're new. And we do that as a way to overcome the time lag between the discovery and the formal naming and formal description of a species. But this is very important, the condition that comes in. We will only include those type 2 temporary names only if they have a proven published record. And that brings me to the 5 requirements that have been put forward by Worms, 5 requirements that a temporary name needs to adjust to before we will include it in our system. So first of all, it needs to be published in at least one peer-reviewed publication. That means that temporary name needs to be somewhere in a publication, which is mostly going to be linked to the research that has discovered the species and that has given it its temporary name. Secondly, it needs to be clearly indicated in that paper as well that this is actually a new species. The scientists know it's a new species. They just haven't gotten to formally describing it yet. The third condition is that a specimen needs to be designated as a representative of that taxon. This is just the preparatory work for the actual formal description of a species. You will need a holotype, so you already design or designate a specific specimen here. The fourth one is that you need to have evidence that that taxon is clearly defined by at least 2 characteristics, independent lines of or traits. So that also needs to be clear. And then the last one, it needs to be clearly differentiated from other taxa within that same genus, for example. That's possible. All these 5 requirements are perfectly possible with a temporary name. What we've also done with Worms, with the community, is put forward, oh, sorry, it's running, is a suggested naming conventions. So theoretically, a temporary name can still be SPA-A, SPA 1, 2, 3, whatever. But for clarity and for ease of communication, even in this temporary stage, we do recommend that you give it a meaningful name. For example, concatenating the abbreviation of the museum where you're depositing the specimen plus an actual reference number within the collection, and combine all that into something that makes a little bit more sense than 1, 2, 3 or ABC. Now, how would a temporary name work in a data flow? Because that's basically what we're looking at. We start at the bottom. You have your specimen and you label it. You give it a name. From your collection, you as scientists are going to publish on it, and your temporary name becomes part of a publication, one of the requirements to get it into Worms. So from there, from that publication, we can document it in Worms. It's documented, it's there, it has its unique identifier, and it becomes part of a lot of the data flows that we have. For example, to Catalog of Life, to GBIF, to OBIS, it becomes part of the general knowledge. What you'll also have is, if you take subsamples for molecular analysis and all of that, that name will also become part of the BOLT and all the other BOLT, GenBank, all those databases. So again, there they will also have an identifier. And then the fun part of all of this is Worms collaborates with all those initiatives. So we deep link again. So you make a full circle of your one temporary name back to your collection, back through the DNA sequencing and so on. So we have our guidelines, we have the publication, it's out there. Now what? We've decided now to make it possible to include those type 2 temporary names within Worms, but then what's your next step? Our biggest challenge that we will deal with is a change in the mindset, moving from a very static, Linnaean, long established and respected way of naming species to also including a more dynamic taxonomy with those temporary names. And also realizing that moving from a temporary name towards a Linnaean name will take time. Again, a temporary name is what it is. It's temporary. It still should find its way to the formal Linnaean naming of things. And to conclude, all of us here, we're either scientists, taxonomists, data managers, bioinformaticians, and all of that. We're not magicians, which means that we very well, also from the Worms perspective, realize that this will take time. What we've done now is we've just made it possible to include those temporary names within the World Register of Marine Species. We have the guidelines, we have the publication, and what we really hope for is that other taxonomic databases and infrastructures such as InfraFADA, Catalog of Life, and all the other ones out there try to see what we are doing and evaluate what we are doing. It's guidelines. It doesn't mean they're fully set in stone. We can be flexible if we have to, but it's a starting point. It's a starting point to deal with an explosion of temporary names that is coming towards us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn, and to all the speakers. Now we have some good 15 minutes for questions. Anyone has any question for any one of the speakers?
To the last talk. Do you put those temporary names in the classification, or they staying like what do you do with them? Because like in Taxonworks, we keep nomenclature, basically only those names which follow nomenclature goes to the taxonomical table. All other names, we can still enter those, but we will treat them as OTUs, and you can link it to the, like, if it's an unknown species, you can link it to the genus level or something like that. What do you do with them?
Thanks, Dimitri. I should have seen that one coming. I don't know if you remember the slides that I put up where you saw the entry in Worms. Within Worms, each taxon gets a status. And the most common status, of course, is accepted. And then there's also unaccepted. And for all the unaccepted status things, we can give a reason why they are unaccepted. So temporary name is a status within our system, because temporary names are most commonly going to be on species level. That means you do know which genus they belong to, so you can right away put them in the classification. We export everything that we have, including the catalog of life. So I think also all our unaccepted names, nomen nudums, whatever, you receive all of them. So they are part of the full global tree.
Okay, thank you. Any other question?
Also on the same, almost on the same issue is, it could probably be a question for your previous presentation. Do you have any idea about from the two main sources of this high entropy on names, on name distribution, how much comes from actual human error, like transcription error or whatever, and how much comes from this new way to introduce entropy into taxon names from a computer database or artificial intelligence new names, which is now the dominating force? Is still the human factor, or is it the database or artificial intelligence factor? Any guess? I run a similar analysis on author names, and I know the answer for author names, but I'm curious about the answer for taxon names.
Well, first.
Sorry, I will have talk on this on the second half of this. I did some estimates on the one particular group, but if the group is complete, I would say 90, maybe even more % of the names introduced are bogus names coming from OCR errors, typing errors, etc., etc.
Yeah, so most are misspellings. And when it really is database to database, we see that as well. But I'm still guessing that most are actually in the order of misspellings, and they happen already in the articles. Yeah, transcription, but even mistakes in the actual article itself happens a lot. Okay, any other points of view? Maybe I then pose a question myself to Richard. You were alluding at the end, like maybe a global list for cultivar names. What do you think it would take, in your opinion? What would be the first step to get there?
I should have known that was coming.
Yeah, you should.
It's easy for me to say, to ask, but I suppose that as a question. The existing system's been in place for 50 years and it's been great as far as it's gone. I think it's not been done currently because it's just seems too big. But I know our living collections manager and the horticulturist at Kew would love to have it. And hence the question, but how we do it is a challenge, but only by starting to think about it can it be done. But we've seen coming together of other backbones, and so it is perhaps something we should think about.
Okay, yeah. Most of the other areas that we have tackled is to probably start with a starting community of the larger sources that will come. That might be your recommendation. Okay, are there any other questions? Yes, Elspeth.
So just following on from that one. So you might want to get the microphone back. Yeah. Yeah. One of the challenges we also have is being able to upload the records with those names into resources like GBIF. And is that something that you're looking at as well?
I think that the challenge is the same. If we were working from a common backbone, those problems would be less apparent because we would be using the same names for uploading, and it would be the same everywhere already. But yeah, as has been stated, we're not there yet. But it would be great if we weren't having inconsistencies just because of our systems. As has already been discussed elsewhere, naming is complicated enough without having different lists of names. So if we could move towards something consolidated, that would be great.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Otherwise, I continue with posing questions. Is there?
What about how do you? So yeah, I was asking what about the other databases like Plants of the World?
Right. So I'm ready for you. So the other big plant databases out there, right? There's the World Checklist of Vascular Plants is what is behind POE. And then there is a resource called World Plants, which is the principal data source right now for the Catalog of Life plant list. So we are in conversations with the team at Q that's behind POE and very actively engaged in working toward, well, as you saw, we already have workflows that do integrate IPNI, WCVP, and yeah, I feel optimistic about the future that we can converge towards a single authoritative list, but it's a process that we're just undertaking right now, but we're definitely aware that we need to come together.
Yeah, and as Catalog of Life, obviously we will support that as best as possible. So any other questions or remark? Piotr.
Thank you. Piotr Tekarski, JP Poland. I have a question to Lynn about these temporary names. Maybe I didn't hear it from you or just forgot it or didn't notice. Do you really want to treat as temporary those OTUs and ASVs, these symbolic names for taxa of actually unclear, maybe not unclear, inaccurate taxonomic ascription, or as assignment, because some of them will probably be never correctly or directly assigned to a species. For example, some of them will always lie somewhere between species under some a genus, for example. So there will never be nominal. So what's the solution?
To be clear, it's not the idea of worms to include all possible otus, motus, whatever you have. No, that's why we've put forward those 5 recommendations, or those 5 things that a temporary name needs to be assigned with. And one of them is that temporary name that you're using needs to be part of a publication. So an referenced, an A1 publication. Only then will we consider to enter them. And this is also a big if, something that I haven't stretched. Within worms, we are completely dependent on our taxonomic editors. So that's a community of over 400 voluntary people that are doing the import into our system. If they say, I do not have the time to deal with this, then the name will not be in the system tomorrow. It might take a week, it might take a month, it might take a year. So there will be a certain delay, but we are only looking at names that we can find in a publication and that have in that publication a statement that says this really is a new species. And then once that new species is actually been described with a Linnaean name, that Linnaean name also comes into worms, and then the temporary name is linked to the valid Linnaean name. We're not going to delete the temporary name because it's in literature, it's circulating, so we keep it. But people will then know that temporary name is now this accepted name.
Thank you. We now move on to online question.
Yes, this is from Roger Hyam. It's more a comment, but well, it says, plants of the world and World Flora Online are very similar already, depending on how you measure it. That's a comment.
Okay.
I don't know if.
Thank you, Roger. Walter.
My comment goes into a similar direction. It adds on to World Flora Online presentation and also to temporary names. And we also have all these variant names. And in World Flora Online plant list, the agreed policy, although perhaps not always followed, is that we should have all names that have been effectively published according to the code because effectively published means every name that is named somewhere in a taxonomic context. And that's very similar to this unpublished or unnamed name thing, which they actually have in Australia since the 70s. But the point is, from the name matching perspective, it's incredibly important to have all these variants, although they are wrong or people are quite sure they are orthographically wrong. But if you match up to the things that you're not going into the process, it could be this and this and this. But that World Flora Online will tell you this is a misspelling for that. And this is something what also distinguishes World Flora Online IDs from IPNI IDs. World Flora Online IDs are for a certain spelling used in a taxonomic context. Thank you.
Okay.
My comment to the last statement. I noticed in the literature what happens, even if we remove the provisional name, we still have a problem with the nomina nuda. Once nomina nuda get in publication, especially as finance get to any catalog, we basically get a circular reasoning. People start referencing it. You will see more citation of this name because you basically kind of validated it for the people. So people don't even bother about going and describe this name because they say, I will just use this as a source of this name. I'm sorry.
If you can very quickly answer, perhaps not a long.
It's just, it doesn't mean you have to publish a name, you just have to resolve it. So if somebody matches against the name, it's found.
Okay, I have a last question to Sarah, actually. Since you, how you say, you have an online one as well. Let me first pose this question, please. So you make a national list. How do you think from international efforts we can help you with the national list? Do you think that there is an interaction there?
Yeah, I'm trying to use the checklist bank to the matching and to come up the issues, and I will check the issues to modify the checklist. And I will upload my checklist annually or biannually to GBIF, but I will try to use the checklist bank or the code DP to do that. And yeah, I think that's all.
Okay,
Thank you.
you. Then we go online.
Yes, this is a question for Lauren. Does World Flora Online have full-time staff dedicated to its administration and tech? If so, how many?
Okay, there's in-kind contributions from partner institutions, full-time staff as such. No, there's people who are on staff at our partner institutions who are contributing up to half-time to World Flora Online. So people who are, let's see, actually no, Sunitha is full-time, right? So we do have Sunitha. So we have one full-time person. Tony, who's here, is halftime. We've got Alan is also halftime. And then we have, all of the, we have a technical working group, which is a in-kind contribution of time also to participate in. Oh, Roger's time as well. I don't know what percentage of his time is paid, but maybe he can answer.
All right, thanks very much. We have come to the end of this first part of the session. We're going to drink some tea, etc., and then we are continuing this exciting journey together.
Sabrás mi trabajo es la voz, cantar con amor ya no bastará. Es poco para mí, si quiero decirte que nunca habrá cosa más bella que tú, cosa más linda que tú, única como eres. Y cuando quieres